A global trade war, a war on Wall Street, and a $100 billion oil gamble? These three massive moves are unfolding right now, but they are not random. Not at all. They're actually chapters from a new playbook, a doctrine that seems designed to completely reset the global economic order. Today, we're going to connect the dots.
It all kicks off on January 12th with this bombshell announcement that just sends shockwaves through the global markets. A sudden, immediate 25% tariff on any country doing business with Iran. At the very same time, a totally different kind of shockwave is hitting right here at home. U.S. credit card debt has exploded to a record-breaking $1.21 trillion. And a radical proposal gets dropped to cap the interest rates charged by the nation's biggest banks.
And then there's this high-stakes meeting where the President of the United States asks the world's biggest oil companies for $100 billion to rebuild a collapsed oil state, only to be told, point-blank, no. A global tariff, a cap on debt, and a Venezuelan oil gambit. They seem totally unrelated, right? But they are all expressions of the exact same strategy, a new set of rules that's rewriting global power. So what on earth is the connection? Well, let's find out.
So our first investigation starts with that January 12th announcement. And look, this isn't just a tax on another country. It's a fundamental shift in how the U.S. wields economic power, and it's all built on this complex and, frankly, very controversial tool.
At the heart of this whole policy is something called a secondary sanction. What that means is, if a country like China or India does business with Iran, any goods they then sell to America get hit with a 25% tax. And let's be crystal clear about this. That tax is paid by American importers, which means it gets passed directly on to you, the consumer.
Now, what's really wild when you look at this is the sheer scale of it. We're not talking about a few minor players here. Over 90% of Iran's oil exports go to China, America's third largest trading partner. Billions of dollars in trade with India, Turkey, and the UAE are also suddenly at risk. This policy effectively forces the entire world to pick a side.
And this is where the policy goes from the geopolitical stage right down to Main Street. Meet Sarah Chen. She's a small business owner in Ohio who imports textiles from Turkey. Now, just because Turkey trades with Iran, her costs could skyrocket by 25% with absolutely no warning. Her choices? Lay off workers or pass that cost on to our customers, who are already struggling with inflation.
And that right there is the core criticism from top economists like former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers. He argues the policy is just economically incoherent. You're creating these massive costs for American businesses like Sarah's, potentially triggering more inflation and harming your own economy more than the country you're trying to target. It's a high-risk, high-impact strategy with some really unpredictable consequences.
Okay, let's pivot to our second investigation. While one policy was aimed at global trade, another was aimed squarely at the financial heart of the country, Wall Street. With American families just struggling under the weight of so much debt, the president proposed a one-year cap on credit card interest rates. And this chart, wow, it just brilliantly illustrates the massive scale of this proposal. The average credit card interest rate right now is a staggering 25.2%, and you've got some store cards hitting over 31%. The plan is to slash that all the way down to just 10%. I mean, for millions of families, this looks like a lifeline. But for the banks, it looked like a declaration of war.
So here's the central debate, right? Is this a lifeline or a lockdown? On one hand, a 10% cap could put an estimated $100 billion back into the pockets of American families. A nurse like Jessica Martinez with an average debt balance could save over $100 every single month. But the banking industry is warning this could create what they call credit deserts. To offset the risk, they say they might have to stop lending to anyone with a credit score below 670, and that could potentially cut off 50 million Americans from their financial safety net.
But you know what makes this story so fascinating? It's the politics. This is not your typical left versus right issue. You've got progressive icons like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the exact same side as conservative populist Josh Hawley. It suggests a really deep cross-partisan frustration with a banking system that a lot of people feel has just become predatory.
And that brings us to our third investigation. A plan so audacious, it honestly sounds like something straight out of a movie. The president gathered the CEOs of America's biggest oil companies and asked them to make a $100 billion bet on rebuilding the collapsed oil industry of Venezuela. The prize here is just immense. Venezuela is sitting on 303 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. That's more than any other country on Earth, including Saudi Arabia. The goal was to unleash all this potential and deliver cheaper gas to American families. But
there was a problem. In that White House meeting, the CEO of ExxonMobil, the world's largest oil company, stood up and delivered one word that just torpedoed the entire plan: uninvestable. It was a stunning, very public rejection, and the reasons why go back decades.
You see, this isn't just about risk, it's about history. The Venezuelan government had previously seized assets from these very companies, and they are still owed billions in unpaid international judgments. Production has collapsed by 71% because the infrastructure is, according to experts, literally rotting away. So the oil giants were being asked to just forget the past and invest billions in a country that had already burned them twice.
So, a unilateral tariff, a war on banks, and a failed oil gambit. When a transactional deal falls through, what's left? Well, the playbook has an answer. Because this is all about a new approach to global power. One where the traditional rules of economics and diplomacy are being replaced by something else entirely: personal loyalty.
And nothing, I mean nothing, illustrates this better than the recent resignation of Australia's ambassador, Kevin Rudd. During a White House meeting, after being asked about Rudd's past critical comments, the president apparently looked him right in the eye and said, "I don't like you." In the world of diplomacy, those are absolutely devastating words. Rudd was effectively frozen out, and just weeks later, he resigned. The fallout from this is immense. This personal confrontation has thrown a cornerstone of Pacific security into total chaos: the $368 billion AUKUS submarine deal. This agreement underpins thousands of American jobs, and it's critical to countering China in the region. Now its future is uncertain, all because of a personal grudge.
So let's connect the dots. The 25% tariff? That's unilateral action. The pressure on the oil companies? That's transactional diplomacy, viewing alliances as just a simple cost-benefit deal. The confrontation with Ambassador Rudd? That shows personal loyalty trumping protocol. All of these moves rely on maximizing executive power. This is the new playbook in action, a fundamental reset of how America engages with the world and its own economy.
Which leaves us with the final and most critical question. We are witnessing an era where decades of economic and diplomatic orthodoxy are being challenged by sheer political will. But is this just a temporary disruption, a chaotic chapter in global history? Or is this the permanent new reality of how power works? The answer to that question is going to define the world for decades to come.